My name is Clara Evans, and the story I'm about to share with you still feels like a secret whispered from another world.
It's something that settles in my bones and sends a quiet shiver down my spine whenever I recall it. If you're hearing this, I hope you'll listen with an open heart. What I experienced could change the way you see the very fabric of your life. I was never one for signs or mystical marks. I found my comfort in the tangible, the explainable. The doctors at the hospital wrote it all down in my chart as a simple syncopal episode, a momentary loss of consciousness. But they couldn't chart what I remember. They couldn't record the impossible purity of the light, the sound of a voice that was more than a voice, or the landscape that existed in a place beyond sound. And most of all, they could never explain the moment Jesus held my hand and showed me what a simple, overlooked mark on the human palm truly means for all of us. It started on a Tuesday, which is to say, it started like any other day. The evening air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and overboiled vegetables, the familiar perfume of my shift at the nursing home. I was tired, a deep-seated weariness that had less to do with my body and more to do with my spirit. As I did my final rounds, I stopped at Mrs. Gable's room. She was a slip of a woman with eyes that held the faded blue of an old summer sky. She rarely spoke, but she loved to have her hand held. "You have good hands, Clara," she'd whispered to me once, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Kind hands." That evening, she gripped my fingers with a surprising strength, her gaze fixed on something over my shoulder. I just smiled, patting her frail hand before gently pulling away. I didn't believe in heaven or hell, but looking at her, I sometimes hoped I was wrong. I was clocking out when the feeling began. It wasn't a pain, not at first. It was a deep, insistent pressure building behind my ribs, as if a fist were slowly clenching inside my chest. I mentioned it to Sarah, my coworker, as we walked toward the exit. "Probably just stress," I laughed, trying to brush it off. Or maybe Mrs. Gable transferred some of her stubborn spirit into me. But as I reached for the heavy glass door, the hallway suddenly seemed to stretch, the white linoleum floor tilting like the deck of a ship in a storm. The world began to move in slow motion, a strange, syrupy ballet of distorted reality. I remember the sound of my keys with perfect clarity, a sharp metallic clatter as they slipped from my numb fingers and hit the floor. The sound seemed to hang in the air for an eternity before everything went utterly quiet. "I'm fine," I tried to whisper, but the words felt like sand in my mouth, my voice refusing to emerge. The floor rushed up to meet me, but I never felt the impact. Suddenly, I wasn't standing, wasn't falling anymore. I was floating, weightless and untethered, near the ceiling. I was above, looking down at my own body crumpled on the floor, a tangle of limbs in a pale blue uniform. Sarah was kneeling beside me, her face a mask of panic, shouting my name over and over. But there was no pain, no fear. There was only a strange, detached curiosity, like I was watching a movie I was no longer a part of, a story about someone else. From my vantage point near the water-stained ceiling tiles, the scene below unfolded with a chilling calmness. My own body, a vessel I had inhabited for 34 years, looked foreign to me, like a stranger's discarded coat. I could see the frantic energy of the people surrounding it, their mouths opening and closing. But their voices reached me as a distant, muffled hum, the sounds of a world submerged under deep water. I saw Sarah's face, pale and strained, her usual cheerful expression replaced by a terror that seemed to age her in an instant. Her hands hovered over my chest, hesitating, as if she were afraid to touch me. I felt a pang of something, not sadness, but a gentle, empathetic ache for her fear. I wanted to tell her it was all right, that I was fine, better than fine, actually. But I had no voice, no way to bridge the impossible distance between us. My gaze drifted to my own hands, lying still and pale on the linoleum. One hand was slightly curled, and in that shape I saw the ghost of another's touch. A powerful memory surfaced, not as a thought, but as a feeling, the dry, papery skin of Mrs. Gable's hand gripping mine just moments before. It was the last physical connection I'd had, a final, fragile anchor to the life I was now watching from afar. I felt that connection dissolve, like a thread snapping in silence, and a profound sense of freedom washed over me. All the little anxieties that had nested in my mind, the unpaid bills, the argument I'd had with my sister, the persistent feeling of not being enough, they all simply fell away. They belonged to the woman on the floor, and that woman was no longer me. Then something beautiful and utterly impossible happened. The stale, recycled air in the hallway began to change. It started to shimmer, not like heat rising from summer asphalt, but like the air itself was waking up, becoming liquid and alive. It was as if every particle of dust and light was remembering it was part of something sacred. The fluorescent lights overhead didn't just illuminate the space, they bled into this shimmer, turning the drab hallway into a cathedral of soft, swirling gold. From the heart of that glow, a sound began to emerge. It wasn't a noise that entered my ears, but a vibration that resonated deep within my chest. A low, perfect hum that felt more ancient than mountains and more familiar than my own name. It was a call, a song of pure welcome that promised a peace my earthly mind couldn't comprehend. It pulled at me, a gentle but irresistible tide, asking me to let go of the chaotic scene below. And I did. I turned away from the woman who shared my name and floated toward the sound, toward the light that promised to explain everything. The chaotic scene of the hallway, with its panicked voices and harsh fluorescent lights, didn't just fade, it dissolved. It was as if the world were a watercolor painting left out in the rain. My surroundings melted into a soft, boundless field of silver mist. It wasn't cold or damp like the fog I knew on Earth. This mist was warm and dry, clinging to my new, formless self like a blanket woven from silk and starlight. It swirled around me, obscuring everything, yet I felt more clarity than ever before. It was a place of profound quiet, a silence that wasn't empty but full, brimming with an unspoken peace. And then a scent began to bloom in the silver air. It was jasmine, impossibly rich and sweet. Instantly, a memory, sharp and vivid, pierced through the haze. I was a little girl again, no older than 6, standing in my grandmother's garden on a hot July afternoon. The sun was warm on my pigtails, and bees hummed drowsily around a sprawling trellis of jasmine vines, their white flowers like tiny stars against the green leaves. My grandmother was there, humming a nameless tune as she pruned her roses, her presence a bastion of safety and unconditional love. That scent, it was the scent of being safe, of being home. Here, in this place beyond life, that forgotten memory rose up to meet me, a gentle assurance that wherever I was not in danger. As I held onto that feeling, a voice whispered, so close it seemed to be inside my own thoughts. It was near my right ear, gentle yet firm, a perfect harmony of strength and tenderness. "It is not your time," the voice said, "but you must see." I turned, expecting to see someone, but there was nothing but the endless, soft sea of silver. My logical mind kicked in, a final, sputtering engine of disbelief. "See what? Who are you?" I thought, my questions echoing in the silent space. Is this a dream, a hallucination brought on by a dying brain? But even as my mind grasped for rational explanations, my soul felt the undeniable truth in that voice. It was a truth that resonated deeper than logic. Before I could question it further, the mist before me began to part. A soft, golden path appeared at my feet, unfurling from the silver haze like a glowing ribbon. It wasn't made of stone or dirt. It seemed to be woven from pure light, from the very essence of the warmth I felt. It pulsed with a gentle, steady rhythm, beckoning me forward into the unknown. I took one hesitant step, and it was like stepping through a heartbeat, warm and infinite. With that first step, the world of sound as I knew it ceased to exist. Every fear, every nagging worry that had ever been a dissonant note in the symphony of my life simply dissolved in the golden light of the path. As I moved forward, I felt a profound shifting inside me, a sensation like the slow, deliberate peeling away of heavy, layered garments I hadn't even known I was wearing. It was a shedding of psychic weight, an unburdening of the soul. With each subsequent step, a specific memory would rise to the surface of my consciousness, not as a thought, but as a living, breathing feeling. First, I felt the sharp sting of shame. I was 7 years old on the school playground, the rough gravel biting into my knees. A bigger kid had just called me a cruel name, and I could feel the hot tears welling in my eyes, the burning in my throat as I tried not to cry. the memory was as potent as the day it happened. But as it surfaced, the warm light from the path flowed into it. It surrounded the image of that small, heartbroken girl not with judgment or pity, but with a wave of immense compassion. The shame didn't vanish, it transformed into understanding. The pain dissolved, leaving only a gentle ache of love for the child I had been. I took another step. This time, a wave of deep, cold regret washed over me. I was 19, standing in the doorway of my father's study. I had promised I would help him with his garden that weekend, but a last-minute invitation from friends had been too tempting to refuse. I saw the flash of disappointment in his eyes, a look I had pretended not to see at the time. The weight of that broken promise, a small thing I had carried for years, felt immense. Again, the light surged, not to erase the memory, but to illuminate it with a new perspective. I felt my father's love, a constant force that existed beyond his fleeting disappointment. And I felt a wave of forgiveness, both for myself and from him, flow through me. The guilt lifted, replaced by a peaceful acceptance. Step after step, the journey continued. The ache of my first real heartbreak, the secret envy I'd felt for a friend's success, the quiet anxieties that kept me awake at night, all of it rose up. It was held in the loving embrace of the light and was healed. It was the most profound therapy imaginable, a sacred review of a life where every wound was tended to with infinite grace. And yet, deep inside, I sensed that this cleansing was a preparation. Something was waiting for me ahead. It wasn't a place, but a presence. A vast, compassionate consciousness that was drawing me forward, a magnetic pull on the very core of my being. I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that I was about to meet someone who knew me more deeply than I had ever known myself. The golden path beneath my feet didn't end, it simply dissolved, its light seeming to absorb into me until I found myself standing in a new space. The silver mist was gone. I was in what looked like a hospital room, but it was a serene, perfected version of one. The walls weren't painted but seemed to be made of polished pearl, emitting a soft, internal luminescence like moonlight trapped inside glass. Beside a bed that looked impossibly soft, medical machines stood silently. They were familiar shapes, yet they hummed with a soft, melodic tune, a gentle harmony instead of the anxious, rhythmic beeping of their earthly counterparts. I noticed there were no wires connecting them to anything, no tubes or plugs. It was then I understood they weren't there to sustain a body, but perhaps to monitor a soul. My first thought was a wave of pure human confusion. My mind, still clinging to the logic of the world I'd left behind, struggled to categorize the experience. Am I still alive? I asked aloud, and the words felt heavy and clumsy in the pristine silence of the room. As the question hung in the air, a movement in the far corner drew my attention. A soft, golden light, no bigger than a firefly, began to pulse. It didn't just appear, it bloomed, swirling and expanding, gathering itself from the very fabric of the room. It grew steadily, not with a blinding intensity, but with an impossible purity. It was like watching the first breath of dawn unfold in a matter of seconds. A primal human instinct flickered within me, the urge to turn, to flee from this magnificent, incomprehensible sight. My spirit tensed, ready to retreat back into the mists. But I was held fast, not by any physical force, but by a feeling that was radiating from the growing light. It was a wave of unconditional love, so complete and absolute that it silenced my fear before it could take root. It was a love that said, I know you, I have always known you, you are safe here. My instinct told me not to fear it because it felt more like home than my own skin. I found myself taking a tentative step toward it, drawn by a force more powerful than gravity. I whispered into the quiet, my voice trembling not with fear, but with awe, who's there? The light pulsed gently, as if in response to my voice. And then I heard it again, that calm, melodic voice that was neither male nor female, but a perfect chord of music that spoke directly to my heart. You are safe, Clara, it resonated. You were called to witness something, not to leave. My heart, or what I perceived as my heart, raced with 1,000 questions. The voice was so calm, so certain, while my entire existence had been turned upside down. Called to witness what? I asked, the words barely a breath. The light pulsed in response, and the pearlescent walls of the room began to lose their form. They didn't crack or crumble, they softened, melting into luminous, swirling clouds as if the very architecture of this place was made of thought. Beyond the dissolving walls, a new vista opened up, one of staggering scale and profound humanity. I saw faces, not hundreds but thousands, stretching into an infinite horizon. They were the faces of every race, every age, every walk of life. A young mother in a hospital bed, her face etched with desperate hope. An old man in a barren field, his eyes closed in quiet surrender. A teenager in a crowded city, tears streaming down his face as he stared at the heavens. They were all praying, crying, reaching their hands upward in a silent, universal plea. And on some of those outstretched hands, a faint, glowing shape appeared. It was the letter M, shimmering in a soft, golden light as if drawn with liquid fire just beneath the skin. The mark wasn't uniform. On some, it was a brilliant, confident sigil, while on others, it was a timid, flickering spark. But it was undeniably there, a secret script written on the palms of humanity. The sight was so overwhelming, so beautiful and sorrowful all at once that I could only whisper, "What is that? What is that mark?" The light answered softly, its voice a gentle current in the ocean of my awe. "It is the mark of memory. Few remember it, fewer still understand it." The weight of those words, the sheer mystery of them, was too much to bear. I felt tears slide down the face I no longer physically possessed. "Why me?" I choked out. "I'm nobody, I'm not sure I believe in any of this." The voice responded with a kindness that seemed to mend the very fabric of my doubt. "You doubted," it said gently. "And those who doubt, who question and seek to understand, are often the ones chosen to see truth most clearly. A closed mind sees only what it expects. Your heart, Clara, was open enough to ask why." In that moment, I realized the golden light wasn't something separate from me anymore. It was wrapping around me like a warm blanket, seeping into every crack and fissure of my soul. It was healing the old wounds of fear and skepticism I had carried for a lifetime. My spiritual breathing slowed, and I could feel a peace so profound it settled in every cell of my being. Yet a quiet excitement pulsed within me. I knew this was only the beginning. The glowing mark on the hands of the people in the vision pulsed once more, a silent, collective heartbeat. And then the light whispered, its voice now a gentle nudge forward, "Step forward, there is more to see." Trusting the voice, I stepped through the glowing, cloud-like doorway where the wall had been. The world dissolved again, but this time I entered a place of pure, soundless energy. Everything around me began to vibrate, not with a jarring noise, but with a living, silent frequency that passed through me, syncing with the rhythm of my soul. It was music, but a music not made of instruments or voices. It was the symphony of existence itself, and I could feel it moving through my chest, a bass note of pure creation. "Where am I?" I asked, though the words were no more than a thought, barely formed before they were released into the vibrant space. The voice of the light, now a part of the very air around me, replied, "You are between. This is the place where sound becomes light and thought becomes creation." My human mind strained against the concept, unable to fully grasp it, but my spirit understood perfectly. This was the engine room of reality. Every vibration carried with it a color, and every color carried an emotion, a truth. Deep blues pulsed with the feeling of forgiveness. Shimmering golds vibrated with the frequency of pure truth. Soft pinks resonated with a gentle, unconditional love. I reached out a hesitant hand to touch a swirling ribbon of blue. The moment I made contact, the color flowed into me, not as a sensation, but as a complete memory. Suddenly, I was 16 again, standing in front of my mother after I'd broken her trust with a foolish lie. But I wasn't just seeing my own memory, I was experiencing the entire moment from a higher perspective. I felt my own shame and fear, but I also felt my mother's wave of disappointment, and more profoundly, the deep, unconditional love beneath it that allowed her to forgive me. I understood then that forgiveness wasn't just an erasing of a wrong, it was an active force, a divine act of grace that rebuilds connection. I pulled my hand back, breathless. I was learning not with my mind, but with my entire being. As I floated in this sea of living color, other flashes began to appear. I saw myself at the nursing home, holding the hand of a dying man, his fear slowly melting away under the simple warmth of my touch. I saw myself comforting a crying Mrs. Gable, humming a simple tune until her trembling subsided. Each of these small, forgotten moments of kindness replayed not as memories, but as threads of golden music. They were weaving themselves together to form one great, harmonious song, and I understood. Every act of love, every moment of empathy, no matter how small or unseen, adds a note to the universe's eternal harmony. Nothing is ever lost. Just as this realization settled into my soul, the sound around me began to change. It deepened, becoming slower, more focused. The vast symphonic hum coalesced into a single, powerful chord, a melody that was both ancient and deeply personal. I felt the presence again, vast and compassionate, and I knew its source was now very near. The focused, melodic chord of the universe hummed with an expectant stillness. From the horizon of light, a single figure began to approach. At first, he was just a silhouette, a form coalescing from the golden energy that made up this place. I couldn't see his face, couldn't make out any features, and yet, a shock of recognition so profound it buckled my spiritual knees went through me. My mind, the part of me that dealt in facts and names, was a complete blank. It scrambled for a reference, a category, but found none. It was my soul that knew him. It was a knowing that existed in a place before words, a feeling like a locked door deep inside my heart suddenly finding its one true key. It was the feeling of a song you'd forgotten you knew, the melody suddenly returning in a rush of pure, unexplainable emotion. It was the feeling of home. My knees felt weak, and a name I had rarely spoken with any real belief rose from the depths of my being and escaped my lips in a reverent whisper. Jesus. He didn't speak right away. He simply continued to approach, and as he did, the space itself began to smile. It wasn't a smile of the lips, but an emanation of pure, unconditional acceptance that radiated from his entire being. It was a wave of warmth that filled everything around me, smoothing out the last remaining wrinkles of my earthly fear. The very colors of the dimension seemed to brighten, the music swelling into a chord of pure joy. I felt known. Not just seen or understood, but known in my entirety, every flaw, every failure, every secret hope, and I was loved not in spite of them, but because of them. When he finally spoke, the sound didn't just enter my ears. It was a vibration that carried through every layer of my being, gently recalibrating me to a frequency of absolute truth and peace. You have seen the sound that shapes the world, he said, his voice the perfect embodiment of the love I was feeling. Now you will see the mark that shapes the soul. Before I could even form a question, he lifted his hand, palm open toward me, and there, at the center of his palm, I saw it. The faint, unmistakable shape of an M, glowing with the soft, internal fire of 1,000 captured stars. It shimmered like gold dust scattered in the air, alive and holy. My breath caught in my throat. I realized in that moment that the music I was hearing wasn't just the harmony of the universe. It was the voice of creation itself, and the one who stood before me was its author. My gaze was fixed on the glowing mark on his palm, a divine signature that seemed to answer a question I never knew my soul was asking. Jesus motioned for me to come closer, and the simple gesture felt like an invitation to the heart of the universe. The air, if it could be called that, felt weightless, as if it were made of pure light instead of oxygen. I took a hesitant step toward him, then another, and with the second step, the solid ground of light I was standing on dissolved beneath me. But I didn't fall. Instead, I found myself standing upon a flowing, shimmering river of light. It stretched into infinity in every direction, its currents moving with a slow, majestic grace. It was endless, soft, and breathtakingly alive. "Where are we?" I whispered, my voice lost in the gentle roar of the silent river. "This is where breath ends and spirit begins," he said, his voice as calm and steady as the current beneath us. "Most people pass through this space without ever noticing it. You were brought here to remember." I looked down into the river's luminous depths and saw more than just light. I saw faint, shimmering reflections of people on Earth. They were sleeping, crying, laughing, working, and I saw their breaths. I saw a tiny baby in a sterile hospital room in Toronto, her little chest rising with her first shocking gasp of air. A delicate ripple of pure white light spread from her in the river. That ripple flowed through the current, and I watched, mesmerized, as it traveled across the river. It gently lapped against the reflection of an old fisherman on a boat in the Philippines as he exhaled his last peaceful sigh. One beginning, one ending, both a part of the same sacred tide. In that moment, I understood. Breath wasn't just a biological function for survival. It was a holy connection, a shared life force that flowed through every living being. Then Jesus reached out and took my hand. His touch didn't feel like flesh. It felt like warm sunlight, a gentle, penetrating heat that sent a tremor of pure peace up my arm. "Do you feel that?" he asked, his gaze soft and knowing. I nodded, my whole being trembling with the overwhelming truth of it all. "Yes," I breathed, it's everywhere." He smiled gently, a smile that held all the love in creation. "That's because the breath you breathe on earth is my own. Life is not a gift that is given only once at birth. It is a gift that is shared endlessly with every single inhale." Tears welled up in my eyes, tears of a gratitude so immense I had no words for it. My whole life I had felt so separate, so alone. But here, in this river of light, I was connected to everything. "Why?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Why was I chosen to see this?" He looked toward the impossibly bright horizon of light. "Because you carry the mark without knowing it," he said softly. "And now it is time for you to see what it truly means." As his words settled into my soul, Jesus moved his palm from my hand and placed it gently over my heart. The moment he did, I felt a searing heat spread through my chest. It wasn't the painful burn of fire, but an intense, awakening energy, like a dormant ember deep within me being fanned into a brilliant flame. It was the fire of recognition, a warmth that spread through my spiritual veins like liquid sunlight, a current of pure memory being restored. The energy surged down my arm and pooled in the palm of my own hand. I looked down, and through my skin, a soft, golden light began to seep, as if it had been locked inside me all along. Faint lines of light, like golden threads, were being drawn by an invisible hand from within. They were slowly connecting, weaving themselves together. I watched breathless as they formed the unmistakable shape of the letter M. I don't understand," I gasped, staring at the glowing sigil now imprinted on my own hand. "What is happening to me?" He smiled again, a look of profound tenderness in his eyes. "You are remembering your making, Clara." As he spoke those words, the river of breath beneath us surged, its light flaring with a brilliant intensity. The gentle hum of the current swelled into a vast celestial chorus. Suddenly, I could hear them all. Millions upon millions of breaths, no longer just a unified flow, but a symphony of individual souls. It was a chorus of all humanity. I could hear the hopeful sigh of a young woman on a first date, the weary whisper of a doctor at the end of a long shift, the joyful cry of a father holding his newborn child for the first time. Every human experience, every private emotion, every secret prayer, it was all carried on that single, collective breath, and in that sound I felt no separation. It was all one life, one song, one spirit. In that instant of pure connection, the final veil of my earthly understanding fell away. I looked at the mark on my hand, then at the mark on his, and I finally understood. The M wasn't a mark of doom to be feared or a brand of control to be obeyed. It was the imprint of divine memory. It was the Creator's signature, lovingly etched into the very core of our being. It was a permanent, unbreakable reminder that we were not random accidents of biology, but that we were made in the image of love itself by love for love. My mind was reeling with a dozen new questions, my soul overflowing with a peace that surpassed all understanding. I opened my mouth to ask more, to try and put words to the infinite gratitude I was feeling. But just as I was about to speak, everything, the river, the light, the presence of Jesus, dissolved into a single, all-encompassing wave of brilliant white light. When the brilliant white light receded, it felt like my eyes were opening for the very first time. I found myself standing in what could only be described as a garden, but it bore the same resemblance to an earthly garden as a star does to a candle. It was a place born from a divine imagination. Every single blade of grass beneath my feet shimmered as if it were woven from starlight and living dew. The flowers were not static things of beauty. They breathed with a slow, gentle rhythm, their petals unfurling and contracting in a silent, perfect dance. I could feel their rhythm inside me, like the earth's own heartbeat had been made visible. The colors were more vibrant than any I had ever seen, and I noticed they would subtly shift and change. A bloom that was a soft, peaceful blue one moment would blush into a gentle gold in the next, responding to some unseen, emotional weather. "Where is this?" I asked softly, my voice filled with a reverence I didn't know I possessed. Jesus stood beside me, his presence as natural here as the light itself. His robe glimmered faintly, like watching a sunrise through a clear stream of water. "This," he said, his voice filled with a gentle nostalgia, "is the memory of Eden. It is the world that still exists, living and breathing, just beyond the veil of your eyes." I looked around in utter awe. Rivers of what looked like liquid crystal flowed through the landscape, and I could hear that every single drop that trickled over the smooth, glowing stones sang its own unique, perfect note, creating a constant, soothing melody. The air itself tasted alive, sweet, and pure, and it carried scents that felt like emotions. The fragrance of peace was carried on a breeze of jasmine, while the scent of hope smelled exactly like the fresh, clean air after a summer rain. There were other beings here, too. They were gentle, graceful forms made of pure light, and they moved through the garden with a quiet purpose. I saw them tending to the trees, their hands gathering motes of light prayers I somehow knew that drifted on a soft wind, weaving them into the leaves and flowers. They were gardeners of souls, nurturing this sacred place with humanity's faith. They acknowledged Jesus with a deep, silent reverence, a bow of pure light. But when they looked at me, their light pulsed with the unmistakable warmth of family. One of them drifted near, and a voice whispered not in my ears, but directly inside my thoughts, a sound like wind chimes and starlight. "Welcome back, child of the breath." The words struck a deep, cellular chord within me, a feeling of returning to a home I'd never seen but had always longed for. I turned to Jesus, my heart overflowing. "Why am I here?" He smiled faintly, because humanity forgot this place, but this place never forgot humanity. Every heart carries an echo of Eden, a deep and persistent longing for home. As he spoke, I glanced down at my hand. The M was pulsing again, its golden light glowing in perfect sync with the breathing flowers and the rhythm of the light-filled trees. My own breath, the light in my hand, and the life of the garden were all beating as one. Then he said softly, "Every soul that awakens to love carries the mark of memory. You are here to see what it truly connects to." A gentle breeze, which I now understood to be the prayers of earth, guided us as we walked deeper into the garden. With every step, the colors around us began to change, shifting from the soft golds and blues of memory into radiant, brilliant whites that seemed to contain every color within them. The atmosphere grew warmer, but not in a physical way. It was an emotional warmth, a feeling of being so completely and perfectly loved that every old wound and hidden scar in your soul simply starts to heal on its own, without any effort. Ahead of us, a light brighter than all the others, more brilliant than a billion suns, yet somehow gentle on the eyes, began to form into a figure. It wasn't human in its shape, yet it felt more human than any face I'd ever seen, as if it were the original blueprint from which all humanity was conceived. An overwhelming wave of pure, holy reverence washed over me, and I instinctively bowed my head, feeling utterly small and unworthy in its presence. But Jesus placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, a gesture of both comfort and strength. "Look," he said softly, his voice full of encouragement. "Look, not with fear, but with remembrance." His words gave me the courage to lift my gaze. I raised my head and looked into eyes that felt like eternity itself. They were eyes that had seen every birth, witnessed every private tear, and rejoiced in every silent miracle since the dawn of time. The being radiated a compassion so intense, so pure, that I could barely breathe. It felt like I was standing before the source of all the warmth, all the light, and all the love in the entire universe. It spoke, not with a voice that made a sound, but with a wave of pure understanding that bloomed directly in my heart. "All who carry the mark," the feeling resonated, "carry my warmth. It is the covenant between creation and love." Tears filled my eyes, flowing freely now. "Then why," I asked, my own thought a trembling prayer, "why do so many people on earth fear it?" The being replied with infinite patience, its understanding washing over my confusion, because they have seen its reflection distorted through the lens of their own fear. The mark is not and never was a symbol of control. It is and always will be a symbol of remembrance. Jesus looked at me kindly, adding his own wisdom. The enemy of truth always seeks to hide in plain sight, twisting what is meant for awakening into an instrument of fear. As he spoke, I could feel waves of that divine warmth moving through me, erasing the residue of pain, guilt, and every false belief I had ever carried about myself. I understood now. The M wasn't a symbol of doom, it was the echo of divine memory. It was the Maker's signature, written into the very fabric of our souls. Then the being smiled, and when it did, everything around us turned a brilliant, joyful gold. I could hear laughter in the air, a sound like creation itself was rejoicing. Before fading back into the pure, radiant light, the being whispered one final sentence deep into my spirit. Guard your warmth, for in cold hearts memory fades. The divine laughter faded back into the gentle, melodic hum of the garden, but the overwhelming feeling of joy and golden light remained. After the being's presence dissolved, Jesus turned to me. His expression was gentle as always, but his eyes held a new seriousness. The look someone gives you just before they ask a question that could change the entire foundation of your life. Clara, he said, his voice quiet and direct, tell me, what do you believe love is? I hesitated, my mind fumbling for an answer. The question felt both simple and impossibly vast. I thought of my work at the nursing home, of my family, of every relationship I'd ever had. I thought love was sacrifice, I finally stammered. You know, putting others before yourself, giving until it hurts sometimes. He nodded slowly, a deep understanding in his gaze. That is half of the truth, he said. It is a beautiful and noble half, but it is only half. Love is also remembrance. It is the act of remembering that you and the person you are serving are both inseparable parts of me. Forgetting that connection is what causes the pain and the hurt you speak of. Sacrifice without remembrance can drain the soul. As he spoke, a vision bloomed in the air before us. I saw a young mother on earth, late at night, rocking a crying baby. Her face was etched with exhaustion, her movements heavy with obligation. I could almost feel her weary thought, I have to do this. Her inner light, which I could now perceive, was a dim, flickering flame. Then the scene shifted. I saw another mother in a nearly identical situation. Her baby was crying, the hour was just as late, but her face was serene. As she rocked her child, she hummed a soft tune, and I could feel the truth in her heart. We are in this together. We are one. Her inner light was not draining, it was glowing, a steady, warm beacon that seemed to be replenished by the very act of giving. The vision faded. A profound realization washed over me. So love isn't just about what we give, I said, my voice filled with dawning understanding. It's about what we remember we are while we're giving. A brilliant smile touched his lips. Exactly, the mark you saw, the M, it stands for that memory, the memory of the divine living within the mortal. When a person acts from that place of remembrance, they don't just give love, they become a channel for it. And that is when they awaken the mark inside their soul. I looked down at my hand again, the golden light from the M now a soft, steady glow, like a candle flame protected from the wind. It all made a new kind of sense, a truth felt deeper than logic. But it also raised another question. Then why, I asked, looking up at him, why can't everyone see it? Jesus looked at me, his gaze holding the gentle patience of a teacher with a beloved student. Because light is not seen with the eyes, Clara, he said. It is felt with the heart. So many search for me in grand temples, in ancient books, in the distant stars. They look for proof outside of themselves when the map has always been written within their own soul. Light only reveals itself to those willing to look inward. Those words struck me with the force of a truth I had always known but had somehow forgotten. I looked down at the soft glow on my palm. So the mark isn't given, I whispered, the realization dawning on me. It's remembered. He nodded, a warm light of approval in his eyes. Yes, and every act of compassion makes its memory brighter. Every moment of forgiveness strengthens its pulse. I felt another wave of tears, not of sadness, but of profound understanding. All the small, seemingly insignificant moments of life, a patient smile, a shared laugh, a gentle touch, they weren't just fleeting gestures. They were sparks, each one helping to reignite the forgotten divine light within. Jesus' gaze then moved toward the garden's horizon. "You have seen the mark on your own hand," he said, his voice taking on a new resonance. "Now see what it means for all." As he spoke, the beautiful Garden of Eden began to fade, its light and color dissolving like a dream upon waking. It was replaced by an endless expanse that looked like the deepest night sky. But the stars in this sky were not distant balls of fire. Every point of light was a human hand, glowing faintly in the velvet darkness. There were millions of them, perhaps billions, a vast, breathtaking galaxy of souls, all reaching upward. Some hands shone with the brilliance of a supernova, while others were just a dim, hopeful flicker. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice trembling, completely overwhelmed by the scale of the vision. He answered softly, his voice full of reverence. "These are the hands of every soul that has ever loved, ever helped, ever healed on earth. Every hand that has chosen to carry light into a dark place bears this memory." I looked closer, my heart aching with a beautiful sorrow. "Why are some so faint?" I asked. "Because many forget their nature," Jesus said, a note of compassion in his voice. "Their light is not extinguished, it simply waits for them to remember." My gaze was drawn to one particularly dim hand, a barely visible spark in the immense darkness. On pure instinct, I reached out my own glowing hand toward it. The moment I did, a surge of warmth, of pure, intentional love, traveled from my fingertips across the void. The dim hand flared, suddenly brightening to a steady, beautiful glow. I gasped. "You just reminded them," Jesus said gently. "Every act of kindness ripples through creation. You may never meet that soul on earth, but your love reaches them here." The sight was beyond words, a galaxy of hands, all interconnected by invisible threads of light that wove their way back to a single, impossibly radiant center. "Is that you?" I asked, seeing the brilliant light at the heart of it all. He smiled. "It is us." Those two words shattered my remaining sense of separation. We weren't apart from God, we were a part of God. In that infinite field of hands, I finally understood. The mark was not about status or being chosen. It was the ultimate reminder that we are all made from the very same memory of divine love. The light from the countless hands in the celestial expanse began to merge, pulsing as one, a single grand heartbeat that seemed to breathe with the universe itself. My gaze dropped from the cosmic vision back to my own palm. The M was no longer a soft, gentle gold. It now glowed like fire, intensely bright, alive, and aware. I could feel it moving, the light pulsing with a vibrant energy, almost as if it were whispering ancient secrets directly into my skin. "Why does it burn now?" I asked softly, mesmerized by its transformation. Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with a calm, steady power. Because truth, once seen, never stays still. When a soul truly understands its purpose, its light intensifies. What you feel is the fire of recognition. It is the active remembrance of your divine origin. I stared, captivated. The shape of the M was perfect, yet it wasn't static. It shifted and flowed like liquid gold, ancient and yet intimately familiar, like a piece of scripture written not on a scroll, but in the very core of my being. "It is not a symbol, Clara," Jesus continued, his voice resonating with profound authority. "It is living scripture. The M carries the memory of your making, the master's mark. It is the spark of me within you." "The spark of you," I whispered, the truth of it settling deep inside me. Then why do so many on earth call it evil? Why is it feared?" As I asked, the fire on my palms swirled, and for a terrifying second, a vision bloomed within the flames. I saw flashes of history, not as a lesson, but as a felt experience. I saw a powerful king, his hand held high, using a twisted version of the mark to justify his tyranny. I saw shadowy figures in dark rooms, whispering lies about the mark's meaning, turning it into a prophecy of doom to control the masses. I saw how its sacred truth had been hijacked, warped into a symbol of division and fear by those who had forgotten its purpose. The vision vanished, leaving me shaken. Jesus sighed, a gentle sound of sorrow and infinite patience. "Because light that is misunderstood becomes shadow," he explained. People see distorted reflections, not the reality. They fear the shadow and forget the light that casts it. What was given for remembrance was turned into an instrument of fear by those who chose power over love. My throat tightened with emotion. The deception had been so complete, so pervasive. So this is sacred, I said, looking at the pure, fiery light on my hand. He nodded slowly. Yes, every person born carries it in their soul. For some, it shows in visions and dreams. For others, it waits patiently until their heart is ready to remember. The glow on my hand brightened again, illuminating the space around me. In that moment, I felt it with every fiber of my being, a pure, unbroken connection to every soul. The M wasn't something to fear. It was the sign that humanity was never abandoned, only asleep, waiting for the call to awaken. As the truth of it all settled upon me, Jesus extended his own hand toward mine, his palm glowing with that same living fire. When our palms met, a silent shockwave of pure white light shot outward, a ripple that seemed to pass through everything I had seen, through the very fabric of creation. I felt a warmth flood my body, not a physical heat, but the undeniable temperature of emotional truth. It was a feeling of absolute clarity, a divine download of pure understanding. The mark, he said gently, his voice anchoring me in the tidal wave of light, is not placed upon flesh by command. It is not a brand for the chosen or a sentence for the damned. It is awakened from within through compassion. He paused, letting the truth sink in before revealing the final layer of the mystery. M stands for memory, it stands for mercy, and it stands for me. I swallowed hard, listening with every fiber of my being as the three words unlocked the final door in my soul. Memory, mercy, me. It was so simple, so perfect. So, it's not about power or control, I whispered, the lies I'd seen in the vision melting away in the face of this beautiful truth. He smiled faintly. Power without love always destroys, but love, true love, is divine power itself. The mark awakens when a person, in any given moment, chooses love over fear. Those words vibrated through my being. So anyone can awaken it, I asked, my heart soaring with the hope of it. Yes, he replied, the proud may wear symbols of faith on the outside, but only the humble truly carry the light on the inside. The world will one day confuse the two. You must help them remember the difference. I looked down at my hand. The intense fire had subsided, and the M was now soft again, glowing gently with the warm, promising light of a sunrise. But what about all the people who never see it? I asked, thinking of the billions of souls on Earth. Will they know? He looked at me with infinite patience. They will still live it, he said. Every act of grace, every unspoken kindness, every prayer whispered for another in the dead of night, all of it brightens the unseen mark within their soul. They are living the promise even if they cannot see the signature. Tears filled my eyes and spilled over, not from sorrow, but from a gratitude so profound it felt like my heart would burst. Then this, I choked out, holding up my glowing hand, this isn't a punishment, it's a promise. Jesus smiled warmly, his eyes shining with the light of the Creator. Exactly, a promise written by the Maker before the first breath of time was ever taken. The glow around us expanded, and in it I could see small sparks of golden light forming around images of humanity. I saw children sharing toys, mothers forgiving teenage mistakes, strangers helping one another. We were made by love, for love, and through love. No darkness can ever erase what light remembers. The words felt both final and like a new beginning, a promise that settled deep into the foundation of my soul. My chest ached, not with fear or pain, but with a gratitude so immense it felt like a star expanding within me. The world had been so afraid of a symbol that was meant to save it. The M wasn't an end, it was the signature of our eternal beginning. As the light dimmed back to a calm, gentle glow, Jesus and I began to walk again. I noticed something new. Trails of soft, shimmering light followed behind our steps, as if every movement we made left a lingering residue of kindness in the very air of this place. The light would hang there for a moment, like stardust, before slowly dissolving back into the atmosphere. What is that? I asked, fascinated by the beautiful, ephemeral footprints we were leaving. He smiled. That is the residue of kindness, Clara. It is the power that is hidden within every human touch. I tilted my head, curious. Touch, I asked. Yes, he said, his voice taking on a new depth. When one soul touches another with true compassion, light is transferred. The unseen mark responds, even when the mind is unaware. He took my hand again, and this time he gently placed it against his heart. The moment my palm made contact, a surge of pure energy pulsed up my arm. It was a feeling beyond warmth or electricity. It was alive, magnetic, a steady, powerful thrumming that felt like I had placed my hand on the very engine of the universe. That's love, I whispered, my voice filled with awe. That is creation, he replied. Every single heartbeat is a spark of the divine. When you hold someone's hand, when you comfort them, when you pray with your hands, you are not just performing an action. You are restoring fragments of Eden on earth. Instantly, a memory flashed in my mind, me just hours ago in my old life, holding Mrs. Gable's trembling hand in mine. What I had thought was a simple, small act of comfort, I now understood was a sacred transfer of light. Those moments that had felt so small suddenly felt infinite. So every gentle act, it really leaves a light, I asked, my mind reeling. He nodded, yes, that is why hands are sacred. They were the first tools of creation, and they are the final proof of our connection. As he spoke, I could see the pulse of light move from my hand into his, then back into mine, an endless, holy loop of shared energy. In that instant, I understood something profound. The real miracle isn't seeing the mark. It's living in such a way that your touch becomes the reminder of God's presence for someone else. And that, Jesus said gently, is the true power hidden inside human touch. We stood in silence for a while, watching the ethereal trails of kindness we'd left behind us fade into the perfect air of the garden. Then the atmosphere shifted once more. The garden, the light, the very ground beneath us seemed to recede, and we stood before something new. It was a vast, shimmering scroll made of pure, woven light, floating in a gentle void and stretching beyond the limits of my sight in both directions. Names glowed faintly across its surface, written not in any alphabet I knew, but in a living script of symbols that my soul somehow understood without ever having learned to read. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling at the sheer, holy magnitude of it. Jesus looked upon the scroll with an expression that held both infinite sadness and infinite hope. This, he said, is the scroll of forgotten souls, those who once carried the mark but over time forgot the sound of love. The word struck me with a chilling finality. Forgot, I swallowed hard. Yes, he said, his voice soft with compassion. They lost their faith in kindness. They turned away from compassion, and they allowed fear to build walls around their hearts so thick that the memory of the light could no longer get in. But even here, Clara, they are not lost. They are only waiting to be remembered. He reached out and his finger gently touched one of the faintest names on the scroll. Instantly, a soft, warm light spread outward from his touch. At the same moment, somewhere far below, I felt the distinct impression of a woman on earth suddenly falling to her knees in prayer, a wave of hope washing over her for the first time in years. Do you see? He asked. When one person on earth prays, remembers, or forgives, another's light here has a chance to reignite. I watched in stunned silence as one by one, other names on the scroll began to glow a little brighter as a kind word was spoken, a prayer was offered, an act of love was performed on earth. So every good deed it brings someone back, I whispered. He nodded. Redemption is not a single dramatic moment. It is a chain of remembrance passed from one soul to another that never ever breaks. Hesitantly, I reached out and touched one of the dimmest spots on the scroll myself. A jolt of warmth surged through my fingertips, but it was more than that, it was a sensation of pure relief. It was like the feeling of helping someone who has fallen rise to their feet, like offering a cool drink to someone dying of thirst. Who was that? I asked. A stranger, Jesus said softly, but one whose heart once beat beside yours in another time. You just reminded them that they are still loved. Tears blurred my vision, then this. This was the work, this was the great secret. This is how heaven heals the world, I breathed. He smiled gently. Not through thunder or fire, but through quiet acts of remembrance. Every soul returns when love calls its name. The scroll before us shone brighter than when we had first arrived, a testament to the love flowing in from the world below. And I understood. No act of love, no matter how small or unnoticed, is ever wasted. It all finds its way back to the forgotten, rewriting their story not with ink, but with light. The scroll dissolved into a cascade of shimmering light, and when it cleared, I found myself standing on what looked like a vast, dark plain dotted with stars. But I wasn't looking up at them, I was among them. Each distant star flickered with a gentle, rhythmic pulse, and I realized they were all beating in perfect time with the glowing M on my own hand. "What is this place?" I asked, feeling as though I was standing in the very heart of time. Jesus looked ahead, and I saw entire galaxies reflected in his eyes. "This is not a place, Clara," he said. "This is a promise. This is what is yet to come." As he raised his hand, visions began to appear between the stars like ghostly, beautiful projections. I saw cities, but not as I knew them. They were filled with people whose hands glowed with a faint, steady, golden light. There was no fear in their eyes. I saw them helping each other, living without the sharp edges of judgment or division. I saw technology being used not for greed or conflict, but to heal the planet. Silent, gleaming vehicles gliding through streets lined with lush trees, and public spaces designed to foster community and connection. The skies were a brilliant, clear blue, and the earth itself seemed to pulse with a healthy, vibrant energy, almost as if it were breathing in contentment. "So this is the future?" I asked quietly, my heart aching with the beauty of it. He nodded. "It can be, it is the future that awaits when humanity, as a whole, remembers the mark. But it is a choice. It depends on whether hearts choose remembrance or fear." The hopeful scene then changed. Flashes of confusion and conflict appeared. I saw people on screens, their faces contorted with anger and suspicion, debating the meaning of the mark. Some called it a divine sign, while others preached that it was a dangerous omen. The world was filled with the noise of opinion and the chaos of doubt. But amidst all the shouting, I saw a small group of people standing silently in a circle, their hands held open, their marks glowing softly. They weren't arguing or fighting, they were simply being. Their collective peace spread outward from them like a ripple in a pond, and slowly the chaos around them began to fade. "The marked ones," Jesus said, his voice cutting through the fatting noise, "will not win the argument through power but through presence. They will not need to fight. They will simply remind the world what it feels like to love without needing to win." A warmth spread through me. "So light wins," I murmured, "not by force but by consistency." A gentle smile touched his lips. "Exactly, darkness exhausts itself. Love renews endlessly." As I gazed at the final, beautiful vision of an earth glowing with a quiet unity, I realized something profound. Humanity's awakening wouldn't come from a dramatic, outside intervention. It would rise from within the human heart itself. And in that truth, I finally understood why I, a simple caregiver from a quiet town, was shown all of this. Because remembering love isn't just the key to a personal heaven, it's the destiny of Earth. The light around us began to soften. The brilliant, fiery glow of the distant stars dimmed into a pale, gentle silver. A soft wind, one I hadn't felt before, brushed through my hair. It carried a sound that felt like both a final, sweet goodbye and a hopeful beginning. The journey was ending, I could feel it. "Is it time?" I asked, my voice trembling with a deep reluctance to leave this place of perfect clarity. Jesus looked at me, and his kindness felt as vast and eternal as the stars we stood among. "Yes, Clara," he said, "but you are not leaving me, you are returning to remind them." A sudden cold wave of panic, a ghost of my old earthly fears, rose within me. "But how?" I asked, my thoughts racing. "What if they don't believe me? What if they laugh? What if they think I just imagined it all?" He smiled softly, a look of complete and unshakable faith in me. "Truth does not need to convince, Clara. It only needs to be lived. Be the love you were shown, and the truth will speak for itself through you." The warmth in my hand intensified, the M glowing brighter than ever, as if in agreement. "What about this?" I asked, lifting my palm. "Will they see it?" "It will fade from earthly sight," he said gently, "but it will never fade from your soul. Whenever you choose to love, whenever you act with compassion, you will feel it again, the pulse of remembrance." I took a deep spiritual breath, trying to memorize everything: the compassionate light in his eyes, the melodic timbre of his voice, the scent of jasmine and starlight that seemed to be the very fragrance of heaven itself. I don't want to forget any of this, I whispered. You won't, he assured me, his voice a steady anchor. The memory will guide you, even when doubt whispers loudly. Tell them the mark is not a thing to be feared. Tell them it is the sign that they were never, ever forgotten. The garden, the stars, the river of breath all began to blur together into a soft, swirling vortex of light. I could feel myself being pulled backward, a gentle but insistent current drawing me away, the way one drifts into a deep sleep. His final words echoed not in my ears, but in the very center of my heart. Carry love like a flame, Clara, and wherever you go, the mark will follow. Suddenly, I heard distant, frantic voices calling my name. The sound was thin and far away at first, then grew louder, more urgent. My chest felt impossibly heavy, compressed, as if a great weight were upon it. My eyelids, which I didn't even realize I had, fluttered. I gasped for air, a raw, ragged intake that burned my lungs, and my eyes flew open. I was in a hospital bed, staring up at harsh fluorescent lights. Doctors in scrubs were shouting, machines were beeping in a frantic, chaotic rhythm, but the warmth in my right hand was still there. It was faint, a gentle, pulsing ember beneath my skin, and though they would tell me later that my heart had stopped and that I had come back, I knew the real truth. I hadn't come back from death. I had returned from remembering life.